of everyone's time. So why don't we go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to Reinventing DAM with Emerging Tech, the third in our 4-webinar series on the human side of DAM. Thank you for joining us on our rescheduled date. We're very lucky to have this great session put on by 3 thought leaders in DAM. We have Jill Talvensaari, a senior marketing leader, executive coach, nonprofit board member, and digital experience industry expert. Kathleen Cameron, who is the digital asset manager of global marketing ops at Google and who has a professional interest in digital asset lifecycle management. Also presenting is Robin Parisse, media therapist, who helps senior Fortune 500 leaders simplify complex technology and processes for continuous growth and success. And I am Sarah Brylowski, the chair of ASIS San Jose State Student Chapter. Before I give it away to our presenters tonight, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation, and as any questions pop up, go ahead and enter them into the chat window. This is more of a fireside chat, so we'll be addressing the questions as they pop in and not all at the end. And also, to start, I want to launch a poll. So just to get an idea of what everyone has some familiarity with, are you guys all able to see the poll? Okay, perfect.
Is it okay if we answer it?
Yes.
It's kind of fun.
I know.
Doesn't love a good quiz.
Okay, perfect. And there.
DAM is in the wheelhouse. Love it.
Great.
And a lot of familiarity with AI and everyone, half on blockchain. That's awesome. Kind of a good session tonight. Well, thanks everyone for joining. So tonight we're going to be talking about how you maximize what you can get out of your digital asset management system with the use of emerging tech. And the ones we're focusing on tonight are artificial intelligence and blockchain. There's obviously IoT and 5G and all kinds of other futuristic ones. The ones we see companies really starting to embrace already, besides the obvious of moving to the cloud, are these two. So that's where we wanted to focus. Here's your panel. You can see us though already. You've been introduced. What we wanted to start off with though, after we did some of the quizzes from the previous 2 webinars that we've done, just to get some feedback. I know a lot of you haven't necessarily been exposed to the full infrastructure or ecosystem of what you typically talk about as a creative operations system or the MarTech stack. And of course, we embrace the digital asset management system as being the hub of that, in the center. But Kathleen, you're right in the thick of this at Google. Can you tell us more about what some of these traditional types of business systems you would see here and where emerging tech starts to play a role?
Yeah, sure. So a marketing tech stack can be variable, and it doesn't just have to be for marketing. I've used similar stacks in higher ed, quite honestly, where you really want to think about where your data is coming in and where it needs to go out. And that can be several different kinds of components. So maybe you have enterprise data coming in from a variety of places. In higher ed, sometimes I had it coming in from a Salesforce. In the marketing world, sometimes it's coming in from, a PIM or an MDM. And then it somehow is getting massaged, as it were, often in a CRM type tool. And it depends on your environment, but that CRM tool can be used lots of different ways in terms of how it's collecting data and aggregating it and sharing that out. I've seen lots of different ways to organize that data and how those kinds of tools get used. It's super helpful if you then can connect that to a DAM or some of your other important technology components within your stack, because it saves you time. It also builds richer data sets, right? And then, sort of the other end of that spectrum is, where does that data need to go? Certainly, all of those major channels are important if you're in marketing. If you're in a different type of organization using DAM, probably minimally you'll be doing sort of that bottom half of that stack: website, mobile, email, and social, all things pretty much everyone is involved in at this stage, right? Even my very tiny art school that I went to undergrad with, they have a presence on LinkedIn. So you see the importance of being able to connect that data, especially with your assets, so that you can keep better track of everything from a larger perspective. I try to say it's more of a 3D perspective than a flat perspective.
Makes sense. Do you want to comment on where, like Adobe Creative Cloud, where the actual asset creation and creative ops piece might be?
Sure. So if you're working with creative assets, it's often Adobe Creative Cloud. Pretty much everyone is working in that. And a lot of these tools will have syncs with the tools you're working in. So they'll sync with Adobe Creative Cloud. They might sync with your Microsoft Office products. They might also sync with your G Suite products as well, so that you get the more automatic linking and then the automated updates as well on those assets. Is that what you were thinking, Jill?
Exactly. And just these days, it's so easy to connect all of these one-way, two-way syncs.
Exactly.
It's whatever your workflow requires. So
And it's about building efficiency, right? And every organization has slightly different tools, but you want to identify what those are so that you can have the conversations about how to build those connections so that the tools are more meaningful for more people.
Precisely. Robin, anything you want to add here? I know you work in this a lot.
Well, the other thing I was going to say maybe is that it used to be we were buying solutions and then figuring out how to interoperate them. Now it's really about the whole ecosystem and how it plays well together to inform key business decisions or operationally maintain sustained business operations or marketing operations at an optimal level. So it's not just a solution-based decision, it's an ecosystem play.
Yeah, and it used to be that you might get all of these from one brand, and supposedly they would interact really well together and play well together. But I can't think, even the last time I looked, we had an Adobe user group and we actually had them draw their marketing stack. Everything was completely bespoke and all over the board in terms of their favorite brands of what they were using for everything from social listening to creation and DAM, for sure.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of recommendations to pick the tools that are right for you and not try to find one tool to shoehorn the little bits that you think you might need, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's also making sure you're getting best in breed and having them play well together. So again, it's about the ecosystem and the right solutions for your organization to do that activity of best in breed and how they play together to get that end result and pull in information externally back to see what the performance measure is. It's not just about DAM user performance or asset counts or asset activities within the DAM. It's related to what happened on social or what happened to that campaign to understand how to do it better, smarter, and get more, as Adobe likes to say, content velocity. I think that's kind of being a mainstream term these days about how fast can I do stuff and how much time, effort, return can I get out of an asset. Are you seeing that too, Jill?
Yeah, one of the big things we see is that the focus for content creators, especially creative professionals that are, highly regarded with what they're doing from a design perspective and other things, is that we really want them spending as much of their time as possible being creative and, creating those designs that other people can quickly use and personalize. So things like sales enablement, folks that don't have any design background, but that way you provide templates and other things for them to have the ability to quickly customize and make things their own, but they still are on brand, or if it's a regulated industry that they're following compliance, things like that. Or digital rights management, that's a huge area, of course.
Yeah.
That everything they're using is sanctioned. And so that's what these systems do, is they automate kind of the brand style guides.
Yeah, and I would say this seems overwhelming if you haven't done it before. So I hope everyone's taking a deep breath. Really what you want to do is kind of take that step back and probably put a knowledge map together and try to really figure out where the data is living, where the data can be shared, and where the data needs to go to, and then how that data needs to be reported out on, right?
And I like the idea of the knowledge map attached to the asset life cycle and all the different things that you deliver or create. So a lot of times your source components are thought about as a whole separate area. But when you look at DAM and MAM and the whole ecosystem, it is that entire knowledge map with those entire asset life cycles, and taking a step back and looking at the entire picture.
Exactly. So your picture may not be this complex. This is a representation of what it could be. And it's not an uncommon stack for a large organization, but it may not be applicable to you. So it's modular in that you can kind of pick and choose what are the pieces that would pertain to your organization.
Yeah, I mean, if you were working for a smaller mid-sized company, you might very well see only marketing automation, website content system, maybe social listening. And then they might be looking for a DAM that starts to integrate with all those, that becomes kind of the broker of all their assets. We see that a lot. They may even already have a PIM. Okay. Anything else here, like as you're considering looking, so if I wanted to lay in a layer of artificial intelligence to help with my search results, for example, what kinds of questions would you start to ask yourself in looking at your system?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I lost that
No.
transition.
I was turning like, where do you start?
Yeah, so let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
So artificial intelligence is, AI is, the word is everywhere. But when you really look at what is AI to DAM today, smart tagging is AI-driven tagging that is pretty basic. Off-the-shelf algorithms are adding value with smart tags around how many people in a shot and so forth. There's recommendation engines that are driven by AI as well. But where people are getting confused is the difference between these off-the-shelf type of things that DAM is starting to do, to machine learning, where you're taking your information and you're doing something with it, either with an off-the-shelf algorithm or one that was written specifically for you, to foster information and inputs to make key business decisions. So you possibly need to know more about your products or your pricing and your products and what those visually look like in your e-commerce play and your retail play. And you might be looking across the ecosystem again to pull in those factors into an algorithm to sort them to have better information across all your systems. Now you can use an algorithm and you can put it to work, but if you don't define the criteria and what is going in terms of data, and keep on it in terms of caretaking or babysitting it, because machine learning is only good as the inputs and the caretaking to get the right outputs, and they're directive outputs. So the more you curate and spend time supporting your algorithms, then they work better as well as if they get more volume of information. And that's why we rely on Adobe Sensei as well as Google's algorithms for facial recognition, because they are churning lots of information about creative design and photos, so they're smarter and people are curating them. When we talk about just general AI, again, smart tags are just a better way to pull keywords, like lifestyle images, cooking in a kitchen, two people at a lake. The idea that you can find those information and ID them faster with these off-the-shelf algorithms that are getting more mature is really helping Dan with that smart tagging aspect. On the other side, you know, when we have analytics coming from other systems, we can again use it with off-the-shelf algorithms against reporting data. That helps us understand our content again and where it's performing well. But there's a balance between AI and machine learning in terms of making it intelligent to meet your company's needs. Because if I'm a florist, my needs as a floral company that grows flowers and manages, you know, a number of growers to wholesale and retail may be much different than a luxury retailer. So wherever I'm sitting, my business decisions are different, and I need to think about what type of things do I want to answer and how can I answer them to make good business decisions? And where does AI, ML play? And we're going to talk a little bit more about blockchain, but where does it play? Maybe Kathleen, you can give some better ideas about using off-the-shelf algorithms to improve your dam.
So first, I would say there is an expectation from your user community that AI is going to solve all the problems and nobody's ever going to have to enter metadata ever again. And that's false. It makes them very sad, but it's just not true. Because you still have structured metadata because you are tracking against those fields, right? You have very specific data that you're collecting that you're tracking against. So it doesn't necessarily replace it, it can enhance it. You can get to a point with machine learning where it probably fills in more of that metadata than just an off-the-shelf plug in an AI model. Most of the time when you plug in artificial intelligence into a dam, you can set certain amounts of parameters, so you can take what they would say a 90% rate or an 80% success rate. And I find that those variables can be adjusted with vastly different results. So I recently uploaded pictures of Paris, and it was fascinating what came in. It's like, this is a bougainvillea, and I'm like, I don't really think that is a bougainvillea, but because it was the same color as a bougainvillea, it picked up bougainvillea. Okay, well, that seems pretty complex to me. Wrong, maybe, but also complex. It also assigned lots of architecture terms to a cathedral, from medieval architecture to Baroque. And it's like, well, what is it? Is it medieval or is it Baroque? Two different time periods. You can usually go in and edit those out, but it's a one-way street at that point. You're only taking in information. You're not pushing information back to train it to know that what kind of architecture it is, what kind of flower it is, how you prefer to call those colors, if you have specific colors. It's not learning your environment as much as just making recommendations. Those tags are still really useful, but ultimately, as part of your metadata editing on any assets you pull in, you're still going to have to do some editing.
So it's an accuracy thing. If you just want smart tagging to say you have it for digital transformation and you're not going to spend time cleaning it up, the value diminishes over time.
Right. And it also depends on what kind of artificial intelligence you're using, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are some tools where if you've got video content, it will listen to every word in, your track and then start to parse things out. For visuals, you know, it is kind of what it is. I'm not sure, I haven't played around with it much with text-based assets. Have either of you? So if you upload a PDF, I'm not sure what it's doing.
Yeah, it's so, you know, again, it's sometimes a combination. So OCR, where it's reading, it tied to
Yes.
AI, tied to, sometimes it's tied to unstructured data, then becomes structured against your criteria points.
Sure.
So again, it gets back to starting with, yes, be curious, but define what you want to answer and what's missing that you could automate in your, if we're talking about metadata tags, define what it is before you go look at it and enable it. So if you're saying, I want to learn these things about my business through these assets, or I need a field tag, those are different questions and they would be curated differently, right?
Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's to go back to the knowledge map. I think it's really helpful to map out some expectations, map out the data people want access to, and then figure out how to make these tools work in your favor.
It reminds me of when I first started on my very first, I guess, digital transformation project, and I was so excited about all the reports I could have. And the engineer on my team that I was working with, he printed them out. And I came in the next morning and there was a huge stack of paper on my desk. And I'm like, what is this? He goes, I was just curious. This was the first 10% of the reports you thought you wanted. I just want to make sure that you really want them. So it's the idea of, we can go in the candy store and we can have all these things, but then we get all these things and you can't eat it all at one time. So again, it's getting to that knowledge map, the asset life cycle, what kind of business you're in, what kind of business questions you need answered, or product questions. And then there's also that machine learning side in terms of, if you want to train a model, where is the data coming from? And what are the data points needed along the way? And do you have unstructured data that you have an opportunity to pull into the funnel and structure it and then assess it and apply it in ways that you haven't been able to before because the technology's there now? And I think that's why I'm kind of excited about the dams that have a graph database, and it's all about the object and the information around the object. What's your thought on that, Kathleen?
Yeah, you know, there are quite a few dams out there that are built on graph databases, and I find that they're all handling the data a little bit differently. So you have to be really careful to ask those good questions about what are the underpinnings of the tools that you're looking at, in part because you want to understand how it's handling your data, and also because you want to understand what the possibilities are for interoperability, and also using things like AI and machine learning, right? Yeah. The graph database has a lot more power behind it than just a regular, you know, old school PostgreSQL. But again, it really depends on how it's been architected, in terms of how the back end is connecting with the front end and how much as an administrator you can actually do with it, right?
Yeah, and the interoperability is key. And that's where I really think the value in looking at the ecosystem and using AI to help with your metadata tagging, but more so to trigger the workflow and the push-pull of data to actually, you know, staple that interoperability together. Because that handoff is so needed, where if it's entered in one place, that it's taken over in that consistent format without having to be re-entered or augmented, and have it, you know, travel with the asset or the object from the get-go, and then augment the other metadata pieces.
Exactly. Yeah, because that metadata often gets created upstream before your assets even get into a dam. And you want to capitalize on that. You want to collect that information as, you know, the workflow is happening with your asset. And by the time it gets to the dam, most of your metadata should already exist. And then AI and machine learning can help enhance that. And I think that is really critical. And I'm hearing more people talking about that finally.
Yeah, I'm excited. The other thing, Jill, you might have a comment on this in terms of bringing that external data back into the system against the asset in terms of how it's performing on social networks or in media outlets, and bring that back to the actual asset level.
Yeah, so two of my favorite things that I've seen AI have a pretty big impact on. One would certainly be informing how popular current assets are that, how are they performing? So should we be creating, of the 150 videos we created, if only 5 were popular and there's something they have in common that possibly even our AI can point out to us what the commonalities are, maybe that's our focus for our next budget. As a marketer, I like to think of where I'm going to spend my next dollar. And if the white papers aren't popular, don't make white papers. So being able to actually predict what content we should create, especially in this world where there's too much content, there's a huge requirement on marketing and creative operations teams to produce a glut of content. And if you're unclear on how it's performing, it's a big question mark whether we should really be spending our time and energy that way, because we all know there's more to do. So I love the idea that in the future I will be able to predict how well content I haven't even yet produced will perform. And we're about there. Some companies have it, very few. When you get to personalization, then how that would perform is where AI would really lend a hand, with a certain subset of customers, for example. But the most fun I've had with AI is actually Adobe Sensei. They're doing stuff like if you've got a walk on tablet or your iPad, you can draw something that looks like mountains, and stock photo will return a whole bunch of different types of mountain scenes. And then I could add flowers, or maybe I want a gorilla that's holding flowers and their baby. But I can start to get it to do that. And then if I want to do a mashup of a sunset in the background, it'll actually create an image for me based on some that I have found and suggest it. If then I want to take that image and I want to put it into my website, and I know my color scheme for my website, it will change the coloration in the photo to match my website. And it can do the same thing with video. If you have a video that's shot one day and then you have more footage that's the next day, but maybe it was a gray day, you can actually take the color of the hour of the day you like, maybe towards sunsets. It tends to have some beautiful colors in photography. It will actually apply that automatically to your entire film. So the ability to do things like that with literally the click of a button and using AI to do it are kind of amazing.
I think we'll all have lots of choices for Zoom backgrounds in the future that we can on the fly change, huh?
There you go. Might be
So, when we're talking about AI and machine learning and these creative capabilities, what comes to mind too is depending on your business, and a lot of businesses in their missions right now is digital transformation and cloud first. So I think it goes back to what both Jill and Kathleen said earlier, that you have that knowledge map, you have that asset life cycle, you have the interoperability and the triggers and handoffs between systems and what role and responsibility you want them to play. And I think then it's the conversation about how AI and ML can help that so that you can reach those digital transformation measurable performances for executive management.
Yeah, and I think so. When I think about AI, what comes top of mind for me as the most impressive benefit to it would be that you have a lot of users, especially when you're doing a digital transformation project. You have a lot of users that really don't want anything to do with these systems, and as far as they're concerned, it's going to make their lives more difficult. And one of the things that you can get from AI is actually simplifying the user experience and making it pretty customized for some groups of users, because it does automate a lot of stuff in the background. And when you think of recommendation engines, way beyond Netflix telling you that you have a 98% fit with this new series that just came out, more interesting is at my point in the workflow, I'm looking at my daily, say I have a saved search of daily what's assigned to me, but it might have caught that there's some related keywords and tags on a couple of other projects going on. It might bring that to my attention and say, hey, Jill, did you realize that project XYZ was just approved by Eileen? Do you want to take another look? So, there was a key change. So it can bring some things like that to your attention that you would normally need to go and do manually. And so I love that it's going to help make humans more efficient, but also prevent a lot of the errors that we might make as well. Kathleen?
Yeah, I think it's exciting times, and to be open-minded about the possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the key takeaway.
Yeah, and it's in its infancy, and most people aren't using it for very much yet. So lots of great examples. There's free stuff like IBM Watson, but at the end of the day, very few companies are doing much with this yet. Yeah. Moving on to blockchain. So blockchain, that's been around since about mid 2006, 7, 8 was when they were first publishing a lot on it. Cryptocurrency is, of course, based on it. But the real benefit of blockchain is the way that it does administration in an automated manner. It was originally meant to take transactional costs. And so when you look at, for example, the best example that's relevant to everyone is when you go to do an exchange of money or cash between currencies, there's always, like almost a 5% or up to 5% that they're taking out of that, the amount of money banks make. Well, the promise behind blockchain was that it has a transparent transaction. It's locked and can't be undone. So you always know from a security perspective who made the change, and it can do it in an automated fashion for you. So technically it would cut out the middleman of, the bank, the currency converter, and those folks, and save the overall world economy, up to 5%. One of the big promising areas for blockchain is in the creative operations space, because there is, in fact, in a lot of digital asset management systems, one of the key things is what are the roles and responsibilities and security and privacy issues of different parts of the brand, or if you have, multiple tenants on something, who can see what across your partners. So say I'm Apple and I have 82,000 partners worldwide and agencies I work with. It's extremely important that they only get access to the right parts of the system and can only see what's meant for them in their part of the portal. Things like blockchain could potentially automate a lot of that and make it more, between that and AI put together, it potentially could completely automate that, so you wouldn't need system administrators to do it all manually or in groups based on URLs, which leads to some security leaks. The other thing that was interesting was the link creator reputation. So whoever actually creates the link to the content, they're tied to it by their key. And so other people can actually start to see what their reputation is what they publish normally used, is it trustworthy, what's its origin. So you can start to have a two-way on that, which gets back to your original point, Robin, on could we predict how content's going to perform? So you could actually look at how it performs out in the world, feed it back in, and go back to the link creator and say, yep, not only are they trustworthy, but they have a high profile for putting out really great content that's popular. Rights management is a natural for this, and as well as contract administration. There are already a lot of contract administration systems that are utilizing blockchain. You'll see a lot of this in legal. We already talked.
Yeah, royalties like music. It changes the landscape for copyright infringement as well as royalty payment. So it's a more straightforward transactional management than we've had in previous years.
Exactly. I know a lot of the it's actually digital experiences and things that you would see put out by like Disney or other theme parks that also own all kinds of other an extended, portfolio beyond, cruises, but they're all using, say, Mickey Mouse. Well, so how do you control all the different types of Mickey Mouse worldwide? Well, blockchain combined with really good digital rights management system can go a really long way.
Yeah, we talk a lot when we're looking at a MarTech stack. Every database creates its own ID, right? Every time you enter something in a database, it automatically generates an ID. But if you're sharing that information, then you've got a lot of different IDs and there's no one true identifier that links all that information together. And I think there's hope that blockchain will start to answer some of those challenges of, if I've got information up here and it connects to information down here, what is connecting those two so that you get some consistency and more relevancy out of that connectivity, right?
And to be clear, obviously blockchain is just a type of database that manages transactions in a new way.
Right.
That's it. And it's perfectly compatible with a graph database that's behind the system that's holding all the content. They all go together, no problem.
Yeah.
A lot of times for auditing and regulatory, blockchain is interesting to tie those things together more cleanly. So I think, in the next couple of years, the combination of these emerging technologies will really make it easier or simplify it. It's not replacing humans, but it's making each of the elements easier to do and a much cleaner interaction in terms of you don't have to necessarily go validate and vet again because it's reliable.
Exactly. So I think we're going to be seeing a much bigger player within blockchain, but right now it's still in its infancy and definitely very tied to cryptocurrency.
Yeah. We have a question. Are there any danger areas with blockchain and DAM?
So what do you mean by danger areas? That is a point of failure, or it is too much information to too many people?
I think
In what
that there
context?
are security risks anytime you're connecting multiple tools, right?
Mhm.
So that's where you want to have a real clear map of what data you're sharing and how that's shared, and making sure that you go through whatever your organization's security office is to make sure that you're doing it in the safest way possible. There are risks every time you're sharing data between systems, especially if they're third-party systems, right?
Well, and
If it's
everything's
all,
cloud first now, right? So if
yeah.
we're all doing cloud first, then that security might be even more important, do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Although, to be honest, even in a racked server environment, there are risks, right?
That's true.
So,
especially if it doesn't have a disaster recovery strategy and a backup strategy. I find it very interesting that that's not an out-of-the-box thought. I mean, that is an out-of-the-box thought when you're starting a DAM project for some folks that maybe bought a DAM before. They don't have to be even a small company not to have backups and disaster recovery strategies. And again, that data management piece could be helped by blockchain or AI as well. But all of things tied together to keep your systems, your ecosystem, and your content, your assets healthy.
yeah. And I think the risk at this point is using blockchain in this environment is still very new. So there are a lot of unknowns. I can't think of any high risk things off the top of my head, but I haven't spent a lot of time with it at this stage. Jill, can you think of anything?
I think the bottom line is that, well, frankly, okay, so blockchain is as good of security as you get from point to point between banks, Federal Reserve, and that kind of thing. So that's why, and it's self-administering and still uses public-private key. I would say there's actually more security risks when you have a human system administrator doing user administration and security and approvals and unapprovals and setting up areas and whatnot, because there's more room for failure.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in the environment we're living in right now with COVID, do you think that there'll be more blockchain traction to add value to folks working at home and supporting that security risk and firewall? You know, is there any opportunity with blockchain to get some traction sooner?
I think there's a lot of opportunity to build more efficiency across organizations as we all work remotely, right? I think people are feeling the pain of disconnected systems more so now than when we were all working in an office together. I'm hearing that from a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
you guys are as well. So I think there's an opportunity for all of us to then capitalize on this moment to say, hey, you know, we can deploy some tools to make this easier and more accessible, you know, from the safety of our own homes.
But like anything, I do think it's a rollout, and it
Oh,
is
absolutely.
really defining, you know, your current state. As Kathleen said earlier, make that knowledge map. Even if you're, you know, a 20-person company versus an 85,000, knowing where your data comes from, what it is and where it goes, as well as your assets against what you do as a business and how you make your business decisions. Those pieces need to be assessed before you jump into anything, is my feeling.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the promise of blockchain, and I'm going to go away from blockchain just a second, but thinking about the challenges I'm seeing across my clients that are remote right now, besides, you know, lack of business continuity planning aside, I'm hearing that people have more meetings than they've ever had before, even from when they were in the office, because everyone's trying to over-index on communication, which that's definitely helpful working from home. However, if we had things in place where we had transaction transparency, but, you know, maybe it's in the way of status reports, project status, if we actually had tools and dashboards we could go to that were real time, we could avoid all kinds of meetings where we would actually know what folks are up to, where things are in the system. And then you instead get to have conversations around, you know, feedback, continuous improvement, and solving blockers and getting things done.
Yeah, I agree. And some of that is understanding what your users need so that whatever dashboard or portal you use, they're getting the information they need to help minimize those meetings. I think that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think it's clarifying what is the technology you're looking for and what problem do you need to solve, because blockchain, you know, these list of bullets where it's being used today and it as it, you know, is best suited for those things today, it could have other transactional things that it's suited for in the future, but you need to look at what's going to fit with what your needs are.
Yeah.
Take baby steps, don't boil the ocean.
Yeah,
exactly. Any other thoughts on this one?
Do we have any other questions, or anybody working with a technology, emerging technology, that they have a question that we should try to discuss? Do we have questions flying across?
no.
Okay.
Everyone's at peace in their homes.
Okay.
Or they're really confused by all this emerging technology, where to start?
Maybe.
So which brings us to, what questions should we be asking as we start to look at new kinds of technology that we want to bring into our system, our ecosystem?
I always go to time, effort, return.
Tell us more about that.
Well, if it takes too much time, costs too much money, and there's no return, why did I do that project and involve so many people? So it has to have a value to my business, my dam, my ecosystem, my users, definitely. To do something just to do AI doesn't bring value, or to do blockchain that doesn't bring value is not a good play. Your playbook needs to bring value to the business and the people of your business.
Exactly. Well said.
Yeah, and I think it's that push and pull of the data and where you build those integrations that you can really generate a lot of meaningful information. So if you're pushing data to social channels, what data has been successful and what isn't, and how do you aggregate that data so that you get good reporting, so you can report up to say this worked, this didn't work, this was more successful than another one based on clicks or views or whatever. In building that more well-rounded, holistic look at what's going on with the content that might be living in your dam, but it's going to other places or it's coming in from other places, I think is where we all need to be headed so that we can continue to validate why we have dams and the value it adds to an organization, right?
Yeah, we used to guess at efficiency models and do it more on how many hours estimated against, a cost of an FTE, full-time person equivalent. But now we have other ways to measure. And I think the exciting part is being able to take in all these inputs and put them together and then simplify them up to show the value.
Yeah.
Because I think as DAM people, we love the puzzles and get it really excited. And now for the first time, we have a 360 view. So now what can you do with that that's powerful?
Yeah, exactly. And figuring out how to sell that, how to get top-down support while you're building it bottom up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we'll see that you need to build out an entire business case for whatever new system you want to bring in. In the case of DAM or in enhancements for DAM, maybe it's AI, for example, you're going to want to show what use cases you're trying to solve for, and then knowing what those use cases are. So usually it'll be benefits like faster search. And so then you can go back to typical numbers you would hear is it takes 40 people spend about 40% of their time searching for stuff, and there's some other percent of time they don't find it and they literally recreate it. I believe that's another 25%.
Yeah.
And then you also see that they couldn't find assets that actually were there. So it's just even putting them all in the same place so that if different agencies within the same larger holding company did the same photo shoots, that they can access each other without repeating them a fifth time. But putting together that data, and usually what you'll end up seeing is how many hours you can save, and it starts to build up to bodies. And what's funny about it is typically to rationalize a change to a system, you show where you're going to save money through automation and not needing people. But what actually I've seen happen is you don't need to add people, but the same group of people is able to produce 5, 10-fold, 20-fold time what they were able to produce before you made the system changes. So you can actually take on that much more work.
And I think there's a conundrum happening with that model because people are doing so much and things need to be more efficient. So we don't have any waste, but how do we get more efficient? How do we not duplicate things? Because when we used to create the financial model and the ROI for DAM, it was really on those duplicate assets, that things are in multiple places. That's still true, but getting back to something that Kathleen said earlier, it's really, again, those interactions between systems and the efficiency, not just operationally, but how I get it out the door and how do I get information on it back in to make a decision faster about what I'm going to do next. So it gets to that full cycle of, ideation through predictive analysis to my next ideation versus just, am I going to get return on buying a DAM?
Yeah, and I think in this environment, we're seeing the importance of being able to access your content for reuse because people aren't able to go out and create new content. Right. So if you're in a marketing organization, there are no photo shoots, there's no new video happening. So how can I repurpose what has already been created to leverage for new marketing or outreach or whatever
Yeah.
your organization is doing.
And we want to be more intelligent and more precise because
Mm-hmm.
we're creating personalized experiences, and we're using, you know, content we've used before.
And we want to track that. We want to track what it was created for and how it's now being used, because that adds to the conversation about value. Like,
Yep.
we spent this money up here, we're not spending it down here, but we still managed to get here because we've saved some money, right? And I think those stories are really key, but you have to be able to quantify that through data. And that's part of understanding what your end-to-end life cycle is, and then how are you collecting that information back so you can get those reports.
Yeah, the other thing too is, you know, I don't know about the two of you, but it's interesting because, you know, it's not just the emerging technology, but it's also the formats. Like the number of video and audio formats we have today is twice as many as we had, you know, 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And then we have those large file sizes of 8K. So it's not just how agile is my ecosystem and how to manage it, but I'm actually has these big pieces of data that I have to exchange with people.
Well, are you getting the right files to the right people?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a conversation we have a lot. You know, maybe somebody doesn't need that 128 gig, 90-minute video. Maybe they need a 6-second clip from it. How quickly can we get that to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And understanding how they're then using that 6-second clip. That return of information is really critical. Yeah, just social. Yeah.
Yeah. We've all had that experience of something getting out and you're like, how could that happen? We have this system locked down.
Yeah.
True.
Do we have other questions out there? I'm not looking at that chat.
I'm not seeing much come in, but feel free to ask.
Jill, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was actually going to just go to the question of what communications and clarifications am I looking for when I start to look at you know, adding in new systems or layering on top of my DAM system? Like, where do I start?
So I think it's okay to start small. If you've got a DAM, you understand how people are using that DAM and what information is important to them. I think the next logical question is, where else is that data being used? Mm-hmm. So is it coming upstream? Does it need to get pushed out somewhere else, to a CMS, to social, whatever? And then asking those simple questions start to get to your building blocks of where else you can connect data and where else you can pull data in from.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, pick your battles. So if you've got your social media team is using like NewsCred, for example, which, you know, does have a DAM behind it, but you have a centralized DAM for all your other assets, do we need to force them to quit using their system of choice, or can we instead just sync the right way and all play with the tools that we already love?
Well, a lot of times in solving for that, if DAM is the digital asset, you know, source of truth, those other systems tend to have a light repository. So you have options. Does the DAM own everything? And it's a view of the asset through the DAM. So even if I have like a Percolate where I can upload an asset, I might decide that I'm uploading to the DAM. There's a thumbnail view in Percolate, but that Percolate user who is project management focused and that's their system of choice they use, they never know that the DAM is there behind the scenes. But the creative person on the other side, they're coming in through the DAM door. They know the project ID because, again, if the data is exchanged correctly, it's optimizing the experience and personalizing it for your user to optimize their job and not duplicating efforts of systems. So it's really important to have each system defined as what's its role and responsibility in this use case? What's it overall to the business? And what is the data it captures? And how is that augmented? Where does it go? Where does it live forever? Just also in terms of the assets that need to be there. If it's in a legal system and it's always a PDF, how does that relate back to the creative source? So I know the relationships. And again, those are curious things that maybe it's transactional, so maybe blockchain can help in the future. But I think those are important things to think about.
Yeah, especially as you're evaluating tools and looking at your ecosystem. To your point, a lot of tools say they have a dam, but it's not really a fully fledged dam. Everything from project management to localization tools to CMSs to
Marketing on demand.
CRMs. Yeah, exactly. So that's where you want to be really clear what the business needs are. And you can always pull out data from each of those systems and aggregate it in a tool that will give you the reporting that you need. That data doesn't have to live in one place, but you could pull it into a Tableau and visualize it, or there's lots of tools out there that will help you get that data pulled together and then analyzed and resolved, right?
Yeah. I mean, somebody's got to be the heavy lifter in the system, but if you're looking for improvement money and you know your dam has the capability, or you want to upgrade to that capability, but another system is doing some of it, that's a time to open the door and do a current state assessment and look at the gaps and say, wow, we could be doing this much better than we are today, and we could be driving more data against this asset use or what have you. Those are the kind of curious things or questions you should be asking in terms of, how do I improve my ecosystem, or how do I optimize the solutions and tools I have today?
Yeah. I think the key takeaway is that your dam should be the hub of your ecosystem, and ideally your single source of truth.
Yes. And sometimes it feels like it's enough to just manage the dam. But there's always other opportunities to connect and make it more meaningful for other people. I always like to ask what data needs to be reported out on. And then that helps validate the information being collected in the dam, and also helps build understanding on how that data might be useful to other people who aren't actually accessing that data on the regular, right? And then there's a great integration, like, how do I get that data to the people who are doing the reporting so that it's meaningful for them, right?
And I think especially in this environment we're living in, that more people are working from home successfully. And what does that mean to our future jobs? Our infrastructure needs to be optimized to support that, both in the office and out of the office.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think we're about at time. So just wanted to invite everybody to our next and final one of the fourth of our series, which is all about you. So how you brand yourself, how you establish those connections in the world of DAM and beyond the whole ecosystem. One of the other things that I kept thinking about as we were talking through new technologies today is that when I think about adding new technology to my my MarTech stack, or whichever part of my organization in IT, I like to go know other people. So what are other companies that I respect doing? And so belonging to organizations like Bay Area Asset Managers or other groups exactly like this one, I'm going to meet people that can inform me on what their experience already is, so I can learn from their experience rather than making my own mistakes first.
Yeah, absolutely. Learn from other people, ask lots of questions. Most people can speak at a very high level and not disclose any company secrets. So it's really a very generous group of people that are in the DAM community, and ask lots of questions.
Yeah, stay curious.
Yes.
So next time we want to focus on all of you. In fact, if you want to bring your own resumes, LinkedIn profiles, goals for what's next, what you're currently doing, we can have a very interactive session on how to put the best you forward and really show up as your best self to advocate for yourself in your current career and grow to your future career.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.